Welcome to our first Strengthening African-Australian Family and Community Relationships Convention 2018. Thank you for coming. It's so humbling to me, you being here and I being your MC. First, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Now, I will be introducing the next three people. They're going to be telling you a little bit more about what this convention is about. And the first person is Teresa. Welcome, Teresa.
Why are we here? We are here because we want to keep our communities, families, and to keep the African and Australian family unit together. And that's what the most important thing of why we are here. Going through this program stemmed from a partnership with the Family Safety Ambassador Program, the Respect project. It was a partnership within my care, New African Men Network, and the African communities. And it was funded by Office of Prevention and Women's Equality, part of and Cabinet. The Safety Ambassador Training Program this is a community-led. We met with the community leaders, from diverse communities, and the partners were My Care, New Hope Foundation, which now used to be New Hope Foundation, Dispute Settlement Center, Victoria, they are the one who the partners, like service providers, Victoria Legal Aid, In Touch, Link Health and the Community, Think and Prevent, and then Faith Leaders. All the first, and some of those service providers and communities, they are here. But also the main of this convention is people to get access to these services, resources which are here. And these people, they are prepared to help our communities, to keep our communities together. So please talk to them. And even they are prepared to come to individual community groups and pass on the skills. We met together, we identified the issues which helped us to develop the training program. The program included a peer-to-peer family violence training model, 8 sessions for peer educators, training programs, and from different groups, Somali, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Liberia, and also Malawi and Uganda. Then the second stage was communities to go and organize education sessions to their communities. And this is one of the part of that program. The people who were in this partnership, it was the Malawi, Uganda, Liberia, Sierra Leone, but all the other communities have organized their own information sessions, as the needs of the community, and in the areas which was selected by the communities. So there is no imposing, we want this, and also the facilitators. These programs were co-facilitated with the specialized service providers, which means taking on the skills to the community and also spreading it on. So training programs focus on well-being of the family, not only family violence identification and prevention strategies, positive communication. There's sometimes there are a lot of miscommunication which might cause to violence. And David here, he is very good with that. Positive communication, relationship building, respectful relationship. And then examples of community activities which are held to youth and families positive communication, where because we have a lot of issues with our teenagers, but sometimes we lose them because we can't communicate. We don't understand their issues, and we push our own understanding of the outside society, and also we impose where we came from. But those issues and gaps can be resolved by proper communication, positive, and listening to each other. So like there was Mother's Day event where the women did a competition of cooking, and then they served the food to the women. They did the dishes, they did everything. And at the same time, there was an information session on how preventing family issues, how do we relate. So this was a combination of the social activity, but also gaining information. Instead of doing a lecture, come we have the information session from this and that, people will not understand it. They will understand it, but they will resent it. But this is if more activities could be done like that. But also they make the activities not attractive, but to people, the communities were assisted with dedicated funding to be able to support those activities. The community members took up the knowledge and skills to their communities. However, this project covered a small number of groups. Therefore, there is a need for more groups to be included and to reach more groups. And all of us together, we should seek funding for such programs because they are more effective. We hope this convention, we hope after your participation and listening to these presenters, you will continue the conversations in your families and communities.
Now the next person is Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca.
This is a family and community convention. And so I thought I should put on the slides something quite interesting. One of the funniest, of course, photos of me and my husband, Charles there. Okay? I know you didn't expect it, but there we are. I thought I should just use that just to inspire one or two people. I thought I should put that photo there just to introduce me. I'm married. I'm Rebecca, and I'm a member of the executive of Victoria Association of Malawians and Friends. But again, people have known me, many people know me as the Vice President for Africa Day Australia. So anytime I try to wear the other hats, people get confused. And so I'm tempted to include the Vice President of ADA because that's the role I've played for a long time, just working across the communities. My humble job this in 2 minutes is just to add on to what Teresa has said about the purpose of this convention. There are 3 things, whether you like it or not, what you should get out of here. Make sure that you have built or developed that awareness of the Australian legal framework in relationship with family law. Because this project or the convention today has drawn from the priority for the Victorian government, family violence prevention and well-being. And as Teresa had put it, my care has supported us quite a lot. So don't forget that, please. The second one is just ensure that you have come out of this place, you have been strengthened or built that capacity to work with other people, family members as well as community members, in creating awareness of the available services which can support families as well as communities. Where can they go to when they are in trouble? Family, individually, and so on. And then finally, finally the third one is, well, we work together. We are not yes, we are individuals, but we live in a community. And so because of that, we should make sure that we have shared our strengths, building our capacity so that when we go out, we should collaborate, work as partners. You find out that at the, I'll just bring this back. My 2 minutes, I know the MC will tell me, Rebecca, it's over. Okay, there we go. That's our banner. Our speakers. That mass rule. It's a partnership. This project has been enabled because of members, as Teresa said, Malawi, African Women Network, South Sudanese, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, Uganda, Liberia, and Ethiopia. And I created that acronym, MASRO. It's not about dictatorship, it's democracy, it's the voice of the people. This convention today has been possible because individual members from about 8 communities or organizations, community organizations, came together and organized this convention. Finally, imagine one of the afternoons you're busy with your family and you receive a call, a member of the family visiting another member in the community, only to be called up to come down because husband and wife are fighting. Imagine you go there, you take the kids and go to the park. By the time you do that, the police are already at the door. This is one of the narratives that you will hear this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that wonderful piece. Our next guest, speaker is Selva Luca, and Selva Luca is a mental health clinician. Welcome, Selva. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank Rebecca and the team for giving me a chance to be a speaker this morning. And I'm happy to be here. The main reason why I'm here is about domestic violence. I think this is the thing that I have personally experienced. Domestic violence happens everywhere because it can be emotional, either money or anything else, maybe physical. For a number of years, I suffered a lot of domestic violence. But firstly, I know you are reading my biography, but I just have to say I come from Malawi, and I am a deputy convener of African Task Force at state level. I'm also a member of Task Force regional level. I'm a member of Victorian VMC Regional Advisory Committee, but also a member in the Victorian Malawi Association. And that's a bit about me. Why I hold all these hats? It's because of my personal experience in domestic violence. I won't say much. The Malawians, they know very well what I've gone through. I don't put blame on anyone, but I just have to say, for us, people of color, domestic violence happens because of unresolved trauma and also other unspeakable circumstances. The countries where we came from, whenever there is a misunderstanding, you go to the elders And actually, when you enter into marriage, you do have a marriage counselor, even before the problem starts, so that they can actually help you when things go wrong in the family. Unfortunately, here, you're just the two of you with your children, and when problems rise, there is always miscommunication. And if you don't communicate well in the families, then problems, one on top of another, one on top of another, and then when it happens like that, then domestic violence, then separation. Who wants to be separated? No one wants to be in a family where you are separated. You want to be together, but unfortunately, this is what happens in our families. So for nearly 17 years, lived in Australia, had problems, then ended up in separation. But do you know, when you have problems, kids are the victims of the circumstances, and this is what is happening in African communities. People are quickly to say or judge that African women don't look after their children very well, that's why they are on the street. The kids are only victims of circumstances. So what happened, I had my own issues with my daughter when we were going through all the problems I had with my ex-husband. But after resolving the problems with my daughter and my job as a mental health clinician, I worked in prisons, worked in hospitals. What did I see? Isolated African kids who required help. So after helping my daughter, opened an organization called Afri-Oz Care. So what do we do at our organization is helping kids at risk and their families. I am emphasizing you cannot only help youth without knowing what is happening in their families. So whatever jobs you will be doing, whatever organizations are doing, I'm encouraging people, encouraging the government, they should always work with the families. Because if you cannot do that, that kid, you can help them on the street or in the office, but when they go home, they are going back to the same problems. Another thing, I'm talking to the African leaders. Whenever you see that there is a problem, work with the person and not talk about them, because it only exacerbates the problems. Because some people can be in their families like they are doing good, but they are not doing good. So we have to work together so that we can have harmony in our families. So what have we done to help youth? What we have done is to develop youth programs. You have to work with youth, what they want, not what you, the older people, want. So we discovered that basketball was a tool. Now we have started indoor soccer. So when you work with youth like that, check what their problems are and again reach out to their families. And you will see that we will be able to get our youth together. I actually salute the organizers for this program. I hope people will continue to support you so that you can reach out your dreams whilst we are strengthening our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And our next guest, many of you know who he is. He's a state member for Essendon, the chair of the implementation of the African Action Plan. He is passionate about social calling, and he believes in a world that's fair and equitable and regards all citizens as equal. Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome Daniel Pearson?
First of all, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. To Rebecca Mebourne, the Executive Victorian Association of Malawians, and the Friends and the Vice President of the African Day Australia, thank you, Rebecca. Look, it really gives me great pleasure to be here today and to represent the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Honourable Robin Scott, who is unable to attend. And I would like to acknowledge the great work that Rebecca performs in her community with Teresa. I got to know Rebecca and Teresa through working on the African Ministerial Working Group. And It's interesting because people like me as elected representatives, we can have the very best of intentions. We have aspirations as the sort of society and community we want to make and we want to create. But we've got our lived experiences. And my lived experience is I'm a middle-aged white guy. And I have got the very best intentions, but I don't know what it's like to experience racism. I don't know what it's like to be a new migrant. I haven't experienced that isolation, that loneliness, and the stresses and the challenges that it brings. And so it's been a really wonderful experience to work with many of the community leaders as we try to understand in a bit more detail some of the challenges the community is facing, and then to try and develop up a response to deal with that. And so for me, I'm really proud to belong to a government where we've established the Royal Commission into Family Violence, and we're now in the process of implementing the 227 recommendations. Part of that is recognising the fact that culturally and linguistically diverse communities have got their own challenges that are distinct from Anglo-Australia. And that's why we've funded nearly $50 million to look at developing programs for those communities. It's also why we've looked at trying to support African Australian communities through the African Australian Action Plan, and that's where I got to know Rebecca and Teresa, who have made a fantastic contribution in terms of developing a detailed, comprehensive program where we can try and really address some of these challenges and issues. Family violence is an absolute scourge in our community, and as previous speakers have spoken, it doesn't discriminate. It's in every suburb in our community. It happens in affluent households, it happens in impoverished households, it happens in Anglo-Australian communities that have been here for 150 years. It's happening to people who have just arrived in our country. It has such a deleterious impact upon women and men as well, but it has can have a particularly traumatic impact upon children. And that's why we need to try and tackle this together, collectively, and to call it out. And it's about, and I was really pleased when I was invited to participate in this conference, because this is about empowering women. Certainly in my community, I think that where we can do more to empower women, we're going to end up with a much better outcome. And it's all about telling men that it's not on. You can't treat people like this. You can't treat your wives and your children in this way, because we know that overwhelmingly it's men who are perpetrating this violence. So a short speech is a good speech. That has always been my rule. So I'm delighted to be here today. I thank you for your attendance. I thank you for the warm welcome, and I hope it's a fantastic conference.
I'm just quickly here, I'm actually not a speaker, it's part of the housekeeping part of this convention. What we'd like to do is to collect some baseline understanding or baseline information, evidence, around what you understand around the three objectives in the system, in the program, one of which is around strengthening your understanding of the systems to support family breakdown, your understanding of the family law policies and procedures and laws, and also your understanding and knowledge of connecting with your broader community. So what I'm going to do, I'm a little bit nervous about this, because I'm going to be taking a baseline survey using a telephone. So what I'd like to do is to explain how we're going to collect your feedback. One of the main things that we've all talked about is the importance of actually collecting, evidence, so that we can make stronger arguments for us to get better and more appropriate support by our partners. So this is not really like an in-depth evaluation, it's the beginning of many more to come. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to ask for your opinion before we proceed with the rest of this agenda, and then I'm at the beginning, and then I'm going to ask for your learnings at the end.
Okay. Zioni, gender, equality, strategic conversations. Zioni Walker, welcome.
Thank you all very much for inviting me. It's always an honor and a privilege to share my context and listen to other speakers at sessions like this. I want to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also actually want to acknowledge that I believe it was yesterday that the Victorian Parliament is actually having discussions to be the first state in Australia to have a treaty with the First Nations. I think that's an absolutely marvellous thing to do, and as Victorians we're all proud of that. And the last thing I want to acknowledge on that front is that as a person of African heritage, we're the oldest people on earth. And that's right, everybody's African. And on that note, I acknowledge Aboriginal people who have the oldest continuous living culture. So I think it's a really interesting circle to have the first peoples be black people and some of the newest people be black. I'll leave you with that thought. All right. Now, when Rebecca invited me to speak, it was really to share some context around my work and some of my observations around gender equality. And last night, we were watching the soccer match with Nigeria and Iceland. And for anybody who's interested, we won, okay? 2-0. But in that conversation, we were talking about a whole range of things. And when a lot of African people get together, we have passionate debates about politics and the economy and how we're going to fix things in Africa and all of that type of stuff. But interestingly, this conversation also led down to family violence, which is actually quite unusual when you have a gathering of 7 families and all their children there. But we did talk about it. And there was one comment that kind of sort of sat with me and left me thinking a little bit. And the comment was, well, women sometimes bring this on themselves. Now, exactly, the men in the room are thinking a very dangerous comment to make in a group full of women. Now, I used to be a family violence lawyer for many years, and I also was involved in leading law reform and legislative changes. So normally a comment like that is a red flag to a bull. But I actually decided to just pace myself and just listen. Just really actively listen to what was being said and shared with everybody in the room. And it dawned on me that sometimes we don't really stop to think about how we've designed our societies. We don't really stop to consider that we've designed our societies sometimes to exclude people and sometimes to victimize others. And it's usually done by the most powerful people in societies. And it's not a coincidence sometimes that in societies that believe, that say white people are superior to black people, you then design segregation or colonization or apartheid or slavery. In societies that believe that older people are more important than younger people, you then say children should be heard and not listened to. In societies that say blind people don't have anything to contribute, you don't design a society that accommodates their contribution and their skills. In societies that say that women are not important, that women are less, or that men are superior, they're more compassionate, they're kinder, they're all round better human beings than women, it doesn't surprise us, and it shouldn't surprise us, that violence against women then becomes an outcome of our shared collective beliefs of our society and who we are. So, in talking about that, I want to share 2 stories. And one of the stories I want to share is a personal story, and the other one is a sort of systemic story. And the personal story has to do with my grandmother. And my grandmother was born at a time and a place where the society was changing rapidly. The society was moving from a society that spoke many different languages to a society that was now using English as the main language of business and communication. The society was also changing to become a society that moved from an oral tradition to a society that now prioritized writing. This was the society my grandmother was being born into at that time. So her father chose to send her to school so she could have access to that language, the new language being English, and that mode of communication being writing. When she was 7 years old, she was a favorite child of her father, by the way, but when she was 7 years old, in his infinite wisdom, he thought, well, if your main role in life is going to be giving birth to children and rearing children, I think this education thing is a mistake. So he took her out of school at 7. And she was very, very, very distressed by that. But she was the smartest kid in her class. So she used to continue to teach herself to read, and she would help her younger brother do his homework, and then their neighbors do their homework. But after a few years, they soon superseded her in their knowledge. And she was left behind, and she could no longer help them. And after a while, she forgot how to read, and she forgot how to write. But the one thing she always had was she had a great facility for mathematics. My grandmother was the original algorithm before there was Google. All right? She could multiply long lists of numbers together because she had to. And so, fast forward many years later, she got married to my grandfather. Now, I don't know if this is the same for other African cultures, but you get married after your age of maturity. And your age of maturity in my grandmother's culture was when, as they say, your mouth was full of teeth, right? So that meant when you had grown all your teeth. Now, we know scientifically that most people have grown all their teeth when they're 18. So there are intelligences in our cultures that sometimes we dismiss, but they exist for a reason. So it meant that you only get married after you reach maturity, after 18, which is actually quite similar all over the, well, maybe does not practice all over the world, but it's quite similar as an idea in many parts of the world. So she married my grandfather, and he died when he was 50 years old, and my mother was about 15 years old. So the men of their village got together to apportion who had what. Now, as many of you will know, polygamy was a practice in Africa, so she came from a family that had 3 wives and 10 children. So they sat around, and they looked at my mother as the oldest child. She's 15, and the elder said, hang on, you're 15. In 3 years' time or so, you're going to have your full teeth. You're going to need to get married. Why do you need to go to school? Why are we wasting the family inheritance paying your school fees? I think you need to sit down. I think you need to get prepared to get married, to fulfill your main role in life. So no, you're not going to school. Now my grandmother, and hearing this, remembered that she was taken out of school when she was 7. And she thought, there is no way my child, who is my only child, will not go to school. And they gave her a choice. She either leaves, or she either leaves school and they can continue to look after my grandmother and her, or she leaves the family and she gets disinherited. And she chose to be disinherited. And so fortunately, as I said, she was very good with maths. She became a trader and she became successful and sent my mother off to university, masters, and all of those things. Fast forward, maybe less than 20 years later, somebody's knocking on the door of our house. And my grandmother happens to be there that day because they didn't live together. And I see my grandmother and my mother huddled in the corner. They have this meeting with this man who came with somebody else, and then he had left. And I knew there was an energy in the house, but I didn't quite, because I couldn't speak my language, I didn't know what they were saying. But after they left, I asked my mother, who was that man and what was that about? And she almost cried, and she said, almost 20 years ago, that man who knocked on the door said to my mother, don't send this girl to school. It's a waste. 20 years later, he's now come back with his son. Can you help my son get a job? Because my mother had now become the human resource manager of one of the largest steel companies in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, if she never went to school, she wouldn't be in a position to give his son a job. So they were having that moment of reflection. So I just share that as an example of the beliefs that we have, the societies that we create, that we design, and how sometimes we're able to navigate and maneuver ourselves and create a different reality. So I acknowledge my grandmother for that. She's passed away, may her soul rest in peace. The other story I want to share is a story that's based here in Australia, and it's about this context. As I shared earlier, many years ago, I used to be a family violence lawyer. And in my career, I would have assisted or represented over 1,000 people. Men, children, I used to do child protection, family law, and so on and so forth. And this day, this woman had come to court and she was completely and utterly distressed. And she was finding it really difficult explaining what had happened to her. So instead of going through all of that, I will just explain the context from behind the scenes. So in essence, what had happened was she had come back home on a Friday from work. She'd gone into an argument with her husband, and he had punched her, and had punched her so hard that she collapsed, fell, and she fainted. He panicked, wasn't sure if she was dead or alive, and then he called the police. The police came, and they saw a child in the house who was 3 years old. They called child protection. In fact, they called the ambulance to take the woman to hospital, and then they called child protection, who took the child. When she came to a consciousness, she asked obviously about her child, and they advised her that, oh, you'll find out soon enough. On Monday, she goes to court, and this was when I met her, totally distraught, thinking, where is my 3-year-old child? This woman was a new person to this country. Her English wasn't perfect. She certainly did not understand the legal system. And so I had to start the process of starting to explain the system that we had designed to support women or anybody experiencing family violence. And so what ended up happening on that day was, on the one day, she had a court case in the children's court for child protection to get her child back. On the very same day, she had another case at the magistrate's court, the other magistrate's court, to get a family violence intervention order. Upstairs or downstairs, I can't remember, the Melbourne Magistrate's Court, there was another matter in relation to her husband because he was charged with assaulting her. So on the one day, she had 3 court hearings. This is a young woman in her 20s, new to this country, thinking, what have I stepped into? This was the legal maze that any one of us would struggle to organize or understand, let alone the sort of emotional impact of, where is my child? I come from a society that would never take your child away from you. How is this possible that the state could intervene and take my child? So I had to explain the process and the reasons that underpin that particular type of society or the design around safety. But she had to make a decision to get her whole family back. We were able to certainly organize that she was going to get her child back, but the condition was if her husband didn't come back home. But she wanted her husband to come back home. So I know there's a lot of mythology out there that, oh, women do this and women do that. Statistically, most people actually want to keep their families together, even in the most extreme circumstances that I personally would not recommend. But as a lawyer, I have to respect their choices. I have to respect the agency of a person choosing however they want their family to live. And so a really important point for everybody to be aware of very quickly is that you can get an intervention order where your family stays together, but the violence has to stop. Okay, it's called a limited order. It happens every day of the week. There are lots of people who you might know who live with their spouses with a limited order, and you will never know. Most intervention orders actually end that way, with that type of agreement. Okay? There's a lot of talk in the African community that intervention orders are about breaking up families. It's not. It's about safety. That's the fundamental underpinning. So how you want to and how you need to design your safety, it's entirely up to how you navigate that. So in the end, her challenge was her husband had an injury. So he was the stay-at-home parent. She worked. The real reason why she really wanted her husband there was so he could look after their daughter so she could continue working to earn a living. But the system was saying, no, but he's got to leave. So he did. Soon enough, I mean, it's a long story and I'm not going to tell you all the details, but soon enough, all of it was organized. She ended up going to the family court system, so the 4th court system, because the man wanted to end the relationship, and they ended their relationship and managed to maintain contact with the children and everything else. So the reason I share that story is just to really emphasize the point about designing the society we want. This is a society and a system that's designed around safety. We know that in this country, 2 women a week die at the hands of their former partner or current partner. We know that 1 in 5 women will experience sexual abuse or sexual assault. 1 in 5. We also know that family violence is the #1 cause for death and disability for women under 45 years old. And so with those type of statistics, of course, we designed that type of society. And so I just want to leave you with a thought. And the thought is, it's really a question for you to consider when you go through your sessions and your workshops today. It's, if our society is based on our shared collective beliefs, what type of society do we want to design? We have an opportunity. We've come from so many different countries and different parts of the world. The society is designed in a way. It's not necessarily perfect. No society is. How can we influence or redesign the society? How do we play a part in that role? So again, I want to thank you for inviting me for today to share my context, my stories, and my observations. And I invite all of you to consider playing a role in the redesign of the society we now live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Zioni.
So first I want to thank you all for having myself. So I'm Elaine Prime from Victoria Legal Aid in Dandenong. And we've got Deidre McCann here also, who's our managing lawyer from Victoria Legal Aid, also in Dandenong. So I wanted to say thank you for having us along today for the conference. I think it's something that our office in particular has been very privileged over the last 6 months or so to be partnering with a lot of the agencies involved with the Family Ambassadors program. So I think that's been a wonderful opportunity for us because we're kind of like that big clunky mainstream organisation to be working with the partner agencies to be building relationships and creating connections with communities. So I wanted to first thank you for having us be involved in the project as we have been able to do. I also wanted to, I guess, also as has been said previously, is also acknowledge that we're meeting the traditional owners of the land and pay our respects to their elders past and present, and also pay our respects to other elders of other communities here today. And thank you again for that. I guess we also wanted to, as we're doing a workshop later today, and it's great to learn from Zione's talk because what we've been asked to come along and talk about is a bit of the legal context when we start talking about the laws in relation to families. So we'll be going into that. I'll explain a bit more about that in a sec about what we're going to do. But we thought we might just also start off with a bit of introduction about the work that we do at Victoria Legal Aid, but also across a number of legal services, including community legal centres. Particularly in relation when we talk about the laws in relation to families, it touched on a number of different areas of law, and part of our role is also to be out there in the community, assisting people to be able to access legal services and understand the justice system, but in particular understand a lot of laws that particularly do impact on families. So I might now pass to Deidre to introduce a bit more about ourselves.
Thanks, Elaine. I really just wanted to give you, I suppose, a bit of the broader picture of Victoria Legal Aid's position within our state and the wide range of services and assistance that we provide, and our role within the justice system and the legal assistance sector. And then, I suppose, drill down to where we're at today and what we're actually talking about. So, VLA is a large organisation and has responsibility for administering the provision of legal assistance in Victoria through what we call a mixed model. So, Legal Aid is responsible not only for providing an in-house practice and employing people like myself, people like Elaine, and lawyers to assist people with legal problems. We also provide funding to private practitioners, so private lawyers who would assist people with legal problems. We also assist in funding CLC, so community legal centres, specialist legal centres, as well as more generalist legal centres. So we have quite a broad role within the community in relation to legal problems that people experience. We are a statutory authority, so whilst we're funded by government, we're independent of government. We have a piece of legislation that sets out what it is that we do. I'm not going to bore you with the details in respect of that. But we are a statewide organisation as well, and you'll see up here a map indicating our locations. So you'll see that we have legal aid offices out as far west as Horsham and Warrnambool, and then as far east as Bairnstone, and as far north as Mildura, which doesn't appear on this map, but we do have a Mildura office. It's a relatively recent addition to the network. We also have an office in Dandenong, which is where I work, and where I work with Elaine, and where we've had quite a lot of contact with African communities, and certainly for myself, has started to develop an understanding of the diverse communities that we service from Dandenong and also across the state. Now, you're probably aware of the fact that legal aid provides legal assistance in relation to criminal matters. It's certainly that has a high profile, I suppose, within the community. Legal aid does that. We also, though, and this is something I suppose is lesser known within the broader community, we do also provide assistance in relation to family law problems, obviously family violence and child protection. We already heard stories about the child protection system this morning. But there are other areas that legal aid provides assistance with that can sometimes, and I suppose actually in our experience quite frequently, become problems that are associated with people who are presenting with family violence problems. So the obvious ones are child protection, crime and child protection. But in addition to that, we sometimes see related problems in relation to tenancy, in relation to social security, in relation to migration, in relation to mental health, and discrimination, as well as victims of crime. Now, all of those are things that legal aid can provide ongoing legal assistance with. So there's a wide range of issues that our officers would be able to assist people with. Now, Elaine's focus today, given the context, is family violence, but she'll also touch upon the fact that quite frequently when people experience those sorts of problems, they end up presenting with other related problems that legal aid can assist with. So back across to Elaine.
So I guess where we're going to go into, I guess, with more of our workshop later today is, we won't be going into this right now, but is in particular thinking about, as I said earlier, the legal context when we think about family violence. Particularly in relation to, I mean, the first thing that I guess we want to also state is that family violence is experienced across the board, across all communities in Australia, and as the MPs, as Danny Pearson's also introduced around, it's an issue I think that we're also still coming to terms with how we approach it within the community as well, and different strategies around preventing family violence. In terms of also the place of the Family Violence Protection Act and the laws around family violence is around challenging that idea that what happens in the home is private. So I think that's some of the areas that we'll be kind of touching on in the workshop later today, is thinking about those behaviours and why we consider some behaviours violent or non-violent, or depends. In particular, I think, is that when we talk about that, is also think about that community response and what can we do as a community when we're thinking about how we respond to family violence. The other thing, I guess, is, let me just looking at my notes, where I guess that as Leonie's already highlighted is thinking about how those different areas of law intersect. So today we'll be kind of touching on mostly around the laws around family violence, so Family Violence Protection Act, but we can also touch on exploring what is the laws when child protection becomes involved in relation to family violence as well. So we'll see you in the afternoon, but once again, thank you very much for having us come along, and we look forward to the rest of the day as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Paul on community partnerships and emotional intelligence.
I think I like to talk when I move about the last, remaining in one thing. Thank you for taking your time to come out in the early morning. My task is quite interesting because I'm talking about community partnership and emotional intelligence. But in order to deliver this message is to understand that we are talking about building relationships and how we talk about building relationships. It's quite interesting that I'm using an example relating to the African communities because the African communities are very complex. I start with respect of the traditional owners of the land in which we actually stand today, and I pay my respect to the present and the past. As you can see, the topic is strengthening relationships with the African community, families in transitions. The word transition there is quite important because we come from lowly backgrounds rather than continental. In order to deal with those complexities that I want to highlight, I always want to start with an activity. And I'm going to ask the 4 volunteers to come over. Can I get 4 volunteers, preferably 2 guys and 2 females? 4 volunteers, please. Can you come over? There is substantial difference in individual behavior and the group behavior. I know that I'm going to be rushing with the time. These are a key conceptual framework in what we call community. Community is understood by 2 parameters. That is what the individuals bring to the setting as individuals, and what is found in an environment. And therefore, when we talk about communities, we refer to these key concepts: the psychological sense of community and the non-psychological sense of community. What is emotional intelligence? It covers the ability to perceive, understand, use, and manage emotions in self and others that are interrelated to do constitute a distinctive form of intelligence. The simple way to look at emotional intelligence is to do the right thing at the right time, for right reasons, in the right space. This is not so easy psychologically. How do you judge? That's the way you can look at emotional intelligence. The first question that we need to ask: how do we come to decisions using this kind of knowledge? Scholars have actually argued that emotional intelligence is the highest determinant of success than even intelligence quotient. Partnership is the parties or partners coming together for self-interest. You can argue strongly that community organizations are in self-interest groups who are coming together for their own interest and try to illustrate or to present those interests in the broader context of society. And that's not easy at all. So, I am just quickly running through slides to give you some key points so that I can come to the conclusions. I know that I may not have a lot of time, therefore I won't be too much details. But you can see that these are common behaviors of people together. As I have indicated before, individuals behave differently compared when they do behave in groups. Therefore, understanding these behaviors in the communities is quite important because we do manage those behaviors, depends whether we are alone or with the others. These are key elements of collaboration. You have to establish a sense of trust, and that's very important. You have to have common vision, you have to have common identity, and the rest. I won't go through the list. You clearly see these are behaviors that people have within community setting.
Our next speaker is
Dr. Charles Mpande on cultural education. Welcome.
I think the previous speakers, Zion especially, touched on a lot of things which I will be working on. A lot of things that I will be working on in the afternoon. I intend to have this as a workshop instead of a lot of talking, which in many cases you capture 30%, 70% goes. So I simply wanted to make an introduction here of the things that I'll be working on. Okay. So my interest is in looking at, here is a new and emerging community. What are some of the things that we experience as new immigrants? And what are some of the helps we will get by understanding ourselves first and then understanding the context in which we come? And here are my objectives. And as I said, we'll be working on these in the workshops. But one is to look at what are the strengths, what are the capabilities that we as communities have, and how can we use those strengths to help us integrate into the community we've come, some to rebuild lives, others to start lives meaningfully. And also I want us to enjoy the forums. I don't want us to sit here and be bored and so he talked for 2 hours and I lost everything. We'll be doing a lot of things that will be fun. Let's enjoy our learning. And the objectives are also simple: provide a framework for self-cultural awareness. So one of the things I would want us to do is focus on, do we understand our own cultural background? Because if we don't, how do we understand the one we come into? So I will just be looking at a framework for self-cultural awareness, and then develop personal framework for working with change relevant to what we consider important. And then also look at appreciating cross-cultural capabilities. As Dr. Paul was showing, it's very hard to communicate sometimes if you don't quite understand how to communicate across different people with different symbols, different beliefs, different values. So also we'll be looking at that. I'll be touching on, in terms of content, influence of culture on behaviors, and then I'll also be looking at the typology of cultures, and Zioni did a good job to show us that we build societies. Societies did not drop down from the high heavens and say, here, live within this. No, we actually construct them. So I want us to look at the typology of cultures and how those affect one who comes in, one who chooses to live within those cultures. A bit on some skills for communicating across cultures, and then look a little bit at process of change. So really I'm just giving you what we'll be doing this afternoon. The workshop, this is how we'll proceed. The workshop, fashion is what we'll adopt. In other words, we'll be doing things. So we'll work on issues we're aware of. I'll be giving you some tasks, some questions, and we'll work in small teams and see if we can get those things out of the deep recesses of our experiences. So this is what happens actually. So that's what I want us to do. Interact respectfully. I want us to talk, and what we say should be understood to be done within a context of learning. It will not be a story I'll take out there, but something that we use to learn within our context. And then we'll be doing some guided teamwork as well. Just to give you some ideas about the things that I'll be looking at. Some people have looked at the concept of culture in terms of the iceberg. I understand the iceberg is so huge underwater, small at the top. And that's more or less like what human behavior is and how societies are like. What we see at the top here, is very little. and what we see are people's behavior. So you might see me every time I meet Mansoura, I look down like this. When she talks, I always look down. You see that. But why I do that is hidden down here. Okay? So there are lots of things that we see in people's behaviors, but the control of those behaviors is down here. It's in people's values, people's beliefs, people's norms. And those things usually are invisible. We don't see them. In many cases also, even we ourselves, when we behave the way we do, this is a small part of things we do that we are aware of. A lot of things that push us to behave that way, we have so internalized them, they have become unconscious. We don't quite consciously do them, but they push out of us behaviors that people see. So there are lots of things that push us to do the kind of things we do, but in many cases these are unconscious, and people only see what we do. So there's lots in communities and in individuals that lies hidden underneath what people see, what people know, which make us behave the way we do. And how do we manage that in a place where you meet lots of new people? All you see is they do things different to you. I have a small exercise which Dr. Paul has begun, which I will do in the workshop, which will make you feel like, these people are funny. And they to look at you, you are funny. And all it is, things down here which make us behave the way we do. And how do we manage that? Okay, continue. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Lots of time. So culture, I need not spend a lot of time on that, but culture, some people have said, is a sum total of beliefs, values, norms which people share, and their patterned ways of thinking, patterned ways of feeling, reacting, responding. That's why they are in the unconscious state, because we are so built to behave that way. When something happens, we react in particular ways. And they are collective programming of the mind. And this programming, when it comes into a new place where there's a different programming, it sort of jams sometimes, and we won't look at ways how we can unjam it and make it work. Sometimes people say culture is the way we do things around here. And you might not be allowed to do your thing. So how do you behave in a place where this is the way we do things around here, not your way, but our way? So cultures, the other thing we need to know is cultures are normal and they are proper in their environment. In their environment, they are normal. But somebody who comes in might say they are abnormal. They are not proper. But in their context, they're very proper. All right? So Jude here was giving us an example of an extreme case of you listen to me, and in that context, proper, normal. In another context, no! So cultures are supposed to be well understood. Who we are, what our cultures are, and then we will understand others. Just to give you a little bit of a taste on these issues. If we focus on values, and I'll give you this as a little exercise. Values are underlying principles and core beliefs that govern our attitudes and behavior. So what we value in life governs how we behave. Now let's take for example this value. And those of you on this side, explicit talk in regards to expectancy. Here, when I came, I saw people saying, oh, my wife is expecting. Oh, congratulations, great thing. In some contexts in Africa, you don't say that. It is very private. And when you begin to say congratulations, what do you mean? It's very private, okay? So explicit talk in those kinds of issues, and in some quarters again, even asking about how many people are in your family and how many are still living, how many are dead. In some contexts, that is taboo. But in some contexts, that's normal. Okay? And I want you always to have in mind that when you look at the value, think of where we are here. We are in Australia. We have a lot of cultures. I know it's multicultural, but the base culture here is British anyway. So I want you to be looking at, okay, here's a value. How would the British feel like in this case? How would the white American feel here? And what about me? Because the point is me. I want to understand me first. Before I understand others, what about me? Would I talk explicitly about these things, or I feel jittery? Anybody says, congratulations, how many are dead in your family? You can't ask about that. So if you know that that's how you feel, you're on the way to understanding yourself. What about tolerance of others, respect for others, and general moderation, which leads people to make understatements, maybe playing down of one's own achievements? Are you the sort of person who says, well, my name is Charles Pandey and I have written 50 books and I have built 50 houses and I drive 10 cars and so on? Are you that sort of person who would say, no, I'm just trying to exist and yeah, just to make it. I'm just one of those simple people in association. Where do you fall? Would you be a guy who would be moderating your position, your achievements, or you're the guy who would blow your horn? Nothing is wrong, but it just makes you understand where you are in terms of values. What about individualism? Linking with tolerance of others. I am who I am, but I also understand you are who you are. Where do you put yourself? Or you would say, no, if you don't behave like me, I'll push you out of here. Okay. Values. Individualism linked to personal achievement and competitiveness. Are you the sort of person who would want to step on others until you get to the top? Or no, you would want to bring along everybody else? Where do you stand? What about respect for elders? Where do you stand? What about community is prior to the individual? Is it me first or community first and me second, or no, me first, community second? Nothing is wrong, but where do you stand? Just to understand yourself. I can go a whole lot into particular values from different communities, but the key thing I want us to get out of these sessions today is understanding yourself first. Do we know what our values are, what our norms are, and so forth? Because if we understand ourselves, then we'll begin to understand others and how we can relate with them. Okay, so just to sort of wrap it up, and I think Katinda is looking at me. Culture, which influences the way we behave, has values, and they lie hidden at the bottom. They have symbols, cultures have symbols. Sometimes we wonder why this, why that, but cultures do have symbols, and if we can understand them, we are on the way to understanding other cultures too and their symbols. And then what we see outside is behavior. So just to understand that all that we see human beings doing really springs up from a lot of things that lay hidden underneath. All right, the rest of it we'll be doing in the sessions. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Charles. Our next speaker is David Leonard. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm from a place called the Dispute Settlement Centre in Victoria, and I'm not quite sure if you're aware of what we do, but we're funded by the Department of Justice to help people who've got any kind of dispute, conflict, resolve it themselves. And the department funds this program. It started as a community organisation. It was there to help people keep their disputes out of the court and out of the legal system. And we started these sessions today talking about the legal system and its impact on people when family violence occurs. And we've talked about the effects of community and the effects of culture. So my presentation is going to go down to those actual interpersonal relationships where disputes occur. And I'm going to talk a little bit about conflict. So I always start when I talk by acknowledging the fact that we are meeting on Aboriginal land, so I too pay my respects to the traditional custodians in the land in which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And then I show you a picture of a car, an old annoying blue Volvo. And the reason why I do this, I often do this at the start of presentations, is to get people to sit and reflect on how they might handle a conflict situation. And this is a very routine, everyday kind of situation where imagine that you're in your house, or your front yard, or your front door, and you see this car chug along and it parks itself over your driveway. Or if you're living in an apartment, it parks in your parking spot. Now you don't have to tell me, but I just want you to think, how do you react to that situation when that person gets out and they've inconvenienced you, they've parked over your space? Different people will have different reactions. Some might say, I don't want trouble, I'm not going to confront that, that's not my personal approach. Other people might immediately talk to that person, take action. So I'm going to change that slightly and say, what if it wasn't a stranger? What if it was the person who lives next door across the road and they always do this? Do you change how you talk or react to that person? Then I want to think, what if it's actually your son's friend? And this is a friend who you don't think is a great influence on your son or daughter, and they come and they park over the parking space like that. Does that change how you feel about the situation, how you react? And the reason why I mention this is the Dispute Settlement Centre, we get all kinds of context, all kinds of conflicts in all kinds of contexts. But there's one thing that's common to all that, and that is that there is a relationship between people. And when it gets to the situation where people need outside help, then often what's happened is respect is broken down in between those individuals. So we work on a basis, on a philosophy, that everybody has the ability to resolve these kind of conflicts if they deal with it early enough. And conflict management is a skill. It's something that we develop as children right from the start when we're competing with needs, when we're competing with the needs of our parents who are tired, we're competing with the needs of our siblings, we're competing with other children when we go to school. So we develop skills to manage conflict. Now some of us have good strategies and some of us have poor strategies. Some of us have good strategies that we sometimes get us into trouble when we apply them in the wrong context. Some of that is culturally defined, some of that has to do with your own personal journey. I mentioned that where I work from, the Department of Justice, we take a very Anglo kind of view to justice, that it's very impartial and we keep the emotions and the behaviour out of things. But at the Dispute Settlement Centre, look, that's the stuff that often drives the conflict. What people talk about or what they present is nothing compared to the emotions and behaviours behind that, and that often goes to broader topics like culture and power structures, which the other presenters have already talked about. We see that the key to managing conflict and trying to prevent small disputes becoming big ones is good communication. And the interesting thing is, when you think about it, is that we have in our society a lot of processes and structures for that. You think about community organisations that Dr. Abrolo was talking about. We have structures in our community organisations. We have meetings, we have rules, we have minutes, we have chairs that manage conversation. But then in a lot of our other relationships, like family, we don't have structural process. Communication happens all the time, it's unstructured. And often it's, when we're under pressure, when there are other factors happening in our lives that the good communication skills that we have are suddenly not applied properly. And that's when things can escalate and get out of control. So we provide a process to help people put their communication back on track. And I should say I'm talking collectively because there are other mediation services out there. In the family context, there's Family Mediation Centres, Relationships Australia. Some of these processes are counselling, some are mediation. The aim is always to try and help people get their communication back on track. And the other thing that I haven't put down here, and now I realise, since that's my topic, is respect, is the other important thing, building respect. And often, it's funny, because the people that we're closest to are often the people where we don't pay the same respect. If we have a stranger who parks in front of our house, we might think twice because we don't know who we are, so we give them a bit of respect to see what they're like. And then in our own personal relationships, and I mention this because I do lots of workshops with lots of different groups and lots of cultures, and people who work as in agency providers, service providers, they often know exactly how to treat their clients and their customers with respect. And when they say, do you do the same thing with your closest family, with your brothers and your sisters? And I'm as guilty as anybody. This is often we don't. Often we're most relaxed about our communication and our respect with our families. So it can happen in any context. And these are the main areas that we work in as the Dispute Settlement Centre, the school community clubs, workplaces. As I mentioned, family services, where there are other service providers. If there is like a separating couple, there's somebody going through a divorce, then we would refer to other agencies. But because what I'm here to talk about is basic communication, I think a lot of this, particularly at the early stages, is mutually applicable. And I've got a picture here of chipped glass. So I just want to imagine, often what happens is when there's an incident of conflict in any kind of relationship, whether it's people who live together, whether it's brothers and sisters, fathers and children, or mothers and children, or it's people who work together in a community organisation. What happens is something that can happen that can damage that respect of that relationship. And there's lots of factors that can pull that thing apart. There's perceptions of individual perception of what's actually transaction. There's misunderstandings. There's competing needs and values behind people, and there's that whole, we've had other speakers talk about cultural factors that come in. Dr. Apollo mentioned that, Charles mentioned that. The way people behave in the situation and the style of communication they use. But the thing is that if we are self-aware, and I think both Charles and Dr. Apollo talked about that, is that sense of self-awareness. If we can look and see what we are doing in that situation, we have a better chance of stopping that small incident from becoming a large one. But here's the rub, is that we're talking about matching intention with effect. Often people judge what they're doing by their intention and not necessarily by the impact on the other person. So they're often not aware of what's happening with that cycle of the loop. And of course, we judge other people by how they are acting and not necessarily by their intent. So I'll give you a really simple domestic example that happened to me. We have a small kitchen in our house, and my partner was cooking dinner and she was chopping up vegetables, and I thought I'll help her. There were some dishes that needed to go into the dishwasher. I'm looking at that dishwasher thinking, how can I walk around without knocking her? And she looks at me and says, what's wrong with the tofu? What's wrong with the tofu? Yeah, you're frowning, you're unhappy about the tofu. And I was like, no, I wasn't. I was actually just concentrating hard on thinking, how do I manoeuvre around you? Now, those kinds of things can flare up all the time if people are not sort of self-aware about matching intention and effect. And there are layers under that, because I guess part of the issue for me is, well, why are we in such a small kitchen? Why have I left my partner cooking dinner when it was my turn? So that could have become a lot bigger discussion, but if there's respect in a relationship, and if people are open and they think about their behaviour and their emotions, they explain, go, no, look, I was just frowning for this reason, then you can diffuse a situation very quickly. So, in a mediation process or in a counselling process, what the benefit of help getting a third person involved in is that they help this situation, they enable listening. They give people time to think and reflect on what they've heard the other person, which sometimes doesn't happen in the day-to-day environment of a domestic environment. They give people a safe way to express their strong emotions. So in a mediation situation, if somebody's angry, we can ask the person to explain that behaviour rather than exhibit it. We can help them unpack what was behind that anger and help the other person understand. We help people focus on the problem, not the solution, and we get people to work together to resolve a problem. And also we help people save face when they're in their situation. So I think Zion earlier was talking about in a forum where she was at, a community gathering, and somebody had mentioned that the word again, that that women bring it on themselves. Because I often get that question asked in a lot of forums, and I can't speak for an entire gender, but when it comes to miscommunication, we're all responsible, and males in particularly need to look at our style of communication as much as the other person. So often what happens in communication is it's an issue of perception. The person's describing something, and here I have a picture of a horse, and I know some people have been in other forums I've done, so you'll know what I'm going to do next is I'm going to flip it on the side. It's a frog. It's the same thing, and this is, I think this comes down to the nub of a lot of misunderstanding in communication, is that one person interprets an image one way, or they interpret a situation one way, another person will have another interpretation. And it's very easy for us to say that person is wrong, and not to say, no, you just have a different interpretation. I need to respect that. Once you develop that capacity, it makes your relationships so much easier to manage. Now, I should say that even though I'm standing here and telling you all these wonderful things, I have been in a situation where my partner said, we need to do some counselling. And as an expert in communication, that sort of hit my pride a little bit, thinking, why do I need counselling? I'm an experienced communicator. But in fact, as a friend said to me, if one person thinks you need counselling, then you need counselling. And it can actually be a positive thing. So it might be that there are deeper issues that we've talked about cultural differences and other things that need to be discussed. So I think the hardest thing for people to do in a situation of conflict is to seek help and to think that the other person is at fault and not themselves, but in fact no one's at fault. The whole relationship needs help. So I will leave you with just a couple of key points I always make about our service, that if you think you need help, we might not be the perfect service for you, but our service is free. We keep your discussion completely confidential, and we can refer you on to other services. So if it's a serious situation you need help, you might need to go to legal aid. If it's a situation where you might need counselling, we can refer people on. There's no obligation. We don't want to force people into processes that they don't need. I'll leave you with our contact details.
Thank you for that.
I think we can start.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for staying back just to listen to our stories. as this section is referred to as African narratives, our own stories or narratives.
Not all of them.
What I'll do is I'll just quickly share one of my shocking experiences. Not a violence, a family violence that experience that happened to me directly, but I witnessed it. And this was a friend. It left an impact on me. It has created in me both positive as well as negative, or it has had both negative as well as positive effects. There was this other day on a Sunday, must have been, no, yes, on a Sunday. After lunchtime, as my family normally does, it's either we go back to our studies, our books, we prepare for classes, teaching, or our daughters, they have to prepare for their work, or we have a fashion designer in the home that she had to go for some sewing. It happened that we were still living with my son, with his wife, and she used to teach music on a Sunday afternoon to a church friend. So when the time arrived, the couple, my son and his wife, went to this other family. Now, as soon as the couple arrived at the door, they heard terrible noise inside the house. And so they listened, and the noise increased. And so they got frightened, they knocked, but the couple who were fighting inside did not open. So they couldn't break through the door. You know how secure Australian doors are. So what the couple did was to call me. And thank God I didn't ignore that call. I answered, and it was my daughter-in-law telling me, "Mom, you must come now. They are fighting." Okay. Now, for confidential purposes, I'll not mention the names of the couple. If I mention names, it means I've just made up the names, okay? Just to be safe on that side. So, quickly, I drove to the place. Now, while I was drawing closer, I saw the police. 2 policemen were already at the door, and with the couple. And you can imagine, now you see with you imagine, but I saw it. The wife was really pointing fingers at the man, and the man was really trying to express himself, defending himself. The police are trying to talk to them, but it wasn't all that good. As I drew closer, my son and my daughter-in-law grabbed the kids and came towards me and said, "Mom, the police, as you can see, are already there." Now, my daughter-in-law is really good at these things, although it was during her first year of marriage and so on. But somehow, she's just that so smart and so on. So she said, "Mom, we must take these kids to a nearby park." Now, imagine. So I had to listen to my daughter-in-law. So we took those 4 children. The park is not very far, or was not far away from their house. Now they are moved. When we reached at the park, the kids could not get their minds off their parents fighting, hearing the screaming, and then the sight of the police. This is what family violence can do on those children. Somehow I understand why there is child protection. It can be bad. If it was shocking to me, an adult, what more the children? 4 of them, at that time the youngest was about 1.5 years, and the oldest was about 6 years old or so. When we reached at the park, just as quickly as I can do, when we reached at the park, it just dawned on me, it's already lunchtime. These kids will need food. So we tried to convince these 4 children to eat something. Every time we tried to distract them, it was either, listen to me, it was either the oldest or the youngest who asked a question. Sister Rebecca, what are the police doing at our house? And we tried to distract them. From nowhere, Sister Rebecca, will the police take Mom? It wasn't Dad. Will the police take Mom? We tried to distract them. Oh, let's go and play this or what? From nowhere, either the youngest or the oldest. Sister Rebecca, I want to go home. When are we going home? Home means a lot to our children. Mom means a lot to the children. But now, understand me, we can't separate the mother from the man. Those children are a product of the two. They are a product of the two, and it just dawned on me. Much as those children were not asking about their dad, I could understand them. But this was the shock that I had, and it has left an impact on me, how family violence can impact on the psychology of the children themselves. But again, look at it. The police to them meant something that was threatening. I think something bad is happening. Something bad is happening. Why are the police there? Now, of course, after some time, we let the police do their job, and then I sent my son, say, can you go, just walk as though you are a stranger, just pretending to walk, just pass the house and check whether the police are still there or not. So he went. We had to be very strategic. He confirmed the police were not there, the noises were no longer there. Now, then he came and said, oh, now we can go home. As soon as we walked closer to their house, those kids ran towards the house. It's all about home and keeping the family unit together. Now, just to conclude, what me and my husband did was, because we attend the same church with that couple, we made an appointment with a couple. So we sat down with them, and my husband, Charles, is there. He took the lead. We did some counseling with them. And during that counseling session, during that counseling session, the husband, as he tried to explain why he was behaving, partly why he was behaving like that, he had to explain. He took off his shirt and showed us scars on the back. Some of those scars were of fingers, and then teeth. Men in this room, please understand us. We are women. Physically, we are weak. And from that incident, what I came to conclude was, whatever the reasons were, that what drove that lady, that wife, to scratch the man on the back, to bite the man on the back, must have been anger, as well as feeling like I'm weak, I can't beat him, I can't defeat him. So she used whatever weapon was at her. whoever is a service provider in this room, think about how can you assist, whether it's male or woman, who can't manage their anger. We need early intervention programs to be placed in place. Probably I should conclude this way. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That was a very emotional story. Very touchy. I was listening to it and I was thinking, oh my gosh, yes, this is what domestic violence does to families. Thank you, Rebecca, for that. And our next.
Please, can I know how long we going to stay here?
It's 5 o'clock now.
15
for
minutes?
me, I want to be long.
Okay,
I will summarize. Can people hear me?
Yes.
I think me as a migrant, and I would like to share with my own personal experience and also working in providing settlement services in Australia. There is a diversity in the family unit. The family unit is complex. There's blended family, there's single parents, and also responsibilities, man having children from other relationships or previous marriages. Where the keyboard? So many people we work with, they face a lot of problems or a number of challenges and difficulties as they try to settle in Australia. Migration issues, social isolation, change of law, family violence, role of community social support. And the cultural shift, changes in the environment, effects of traveling. Some people have been separated from their families for many years. They have been in camps. And when they come here, there is cultural differences, and also they haven't seen each other for many years. So you can imagine that a woman came here first, and the man followed maybe 10 years ago. I have developed different values from the African Australian community, and the man comes and says, I'm the man, and you have to cook, you have to do this. So that also causes conflict. And some of the values that held people together have shifted. Like from I grew up in a village, and we had collective responsibility of bringing up children, even for families. So collective responsibilities, social cohesion, caring for each other, all that is not there. And the relationship and the sustenance around the world, the best place is the family unit. So what it takes to have a good relationship? Shared love, respect, trust, forgiving and forgetting. Let things go. People can make mistakes. Develop communication skills to be able to talk about it. Improve family, clear, open, respectful communication, and the closeness, sharing opinions and diverse views, not one view, or being defensive. Develop healthy parenting style. Work as a team. Most of our families, we are losing our teenagers or as children as they are growing up. How can we keep those children and not let them go to child protection or intervene? Sometimes it's lack of, as David said, lack of communication and understanding these young people. The pressure they have and peer groups, and also the pressure of the parents. Families that work together toward respective relationship are the ones who have a great chance of surviving. Disciplining our children without losing them to the system. steering the children through stressful stages. So like when they go to school, they have a lot of pressure, and even in the school education, they are falling out. How can we develop a relationship with our children instead of letting them go to the streets? Be a good role model, a friend, trust them, respecting their feelings and also rights. At the same time, they should respect our rights and also the respect of sharing. Be a friend, not a dictator, especially to the children. Acknowledge your family members' feelings. Give yourself time to respond or to cool down. Because if you just respond instantly, you might say something which somebody will never forget. But just reflect and give yourself time. You communicate it later, but it may give you time to cool down. Balancing work and family. Some people work so hard, especially to earn money. But you are going to have that money, but you are losing the family, you are losing the children. Because you come home tired, you go to sleep. You wake up at 4 o'clock, you are going back the night shift. So, and that's be supportive in hard times. When there's no money, you can negotiate or talk. And be open even with the children. Because sometimes children, they think we have money, but sometimes we don't have. I can give an example of my son when they were growing up. That time the Nintendo was hot and he wanted a Nintendo because of his friends had a Nintendo. And he came home and said, Mom, how I want Nintendo. I said, look, we can't, we don't have the money. At that time I was, John and Mebourne was working, my husband wasn't working, and said, no, go to the bank. I said, well, the money has to go to be in the bank. You don't just go to the bank. So what I said, look, I brought them with my daughter, we have these bills to pay. And once we clear these bills, then I'll be able to buy Nintendo. So he kept on asking, oh, Mom, have you paid those bills? I said, oh, we still have one. Oh, well, but at least this was like a negotiation and also letting him know that we can't afford it. No other kids have it, but this is the situation we are in. And dealing with complex family issues, but the out of family issues which we can't deal with as a community or workers, refer them to other services. That's why we had people from legal aid, mediation, and something. Refer them on, very comfortable. Even within the community, there are other resources in the community. If we don't have to, so that we can refer them. So what can we do as a community, on a community level? Alternative strategies of resolving problems, customs culture, leader, understanding the harmony. So we need to use a range of engagement strategies to be able to support the families. I think I will some of the programs we have run, especially with African, just to support the families. We have run family and youth camps, and there we share information and also develop relationship with the young people. Like soccer team every Sunday. Go with your children to those sports, especially men. I find that we run a homework program where I work, and it's the women who bring the children. The men, even when they come, they stay in the car. They don't even know what it is happening. So be part of the family. Be part of your children's growing. Talk to them. I know you can ask them after school and say, good. But so you can get it more than exploring what happened. So I think, so there are some of the engaging young people. shared yours and working with those men there. Like Sudanese men, they never even go in the kitchen at home. But they will have to adapt here. African Australian communities must work together more effectively, create initiatives that strongly extend the family. I think that's it.
Our last person that's going to be doing the narrative is Tim. Thank you, Tim, but we don't have much time.
How long?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Oh, okay. Because I was, in Africa it can be a biological man, but I was in man, Rebecca said, Tim, the email should be short, don't talk long. So, what I will say, guys, thanks to you all for attending this program. I don't have much to say because people have explained more in regards to the challenges and difficulties Africans are facing when it comes to the legal and justice system in Australia. Many, you are saying, oh, man, take it easy with a woman. But where we come from, I go and pay dowry for a woman. If that woman come to me, I'm responsible for she and her parents. So that what makes some men get frustrated. If a woman comes to Australia, they don't want to listen to the man. And in a community, as a community leader, what I experience, sometimes the intervention or police being called. They say, oh, police, so women say they can get frustrated. They don't want, even though they're crying, but they don't want for the police to be involved. They can come to break the relationship. And the man too, why he's frustrated because the woman, in our tradition, and most play, when it comes to Australia now, seeing how things are different, men working, women working, they getting money, but the parents, if father-in-law come visit me, or the father-in-law said to me when I was in Africa, there was a time I went to visit my father-in-law at the age of 22 at that time. The man said to me, you're not good. I got surprised. He said, you and my daughter got together. You haven't even given me $1. I said, oh, how can you visit my father-in-law? You told me that. I was just quiet. So my mom said to me, forget about it. The man said he born his daughter, he struggled behind his daughter. And he wanted his daughter to marry a rich man that at least will get money. But Australian law don't understand it. Most parents in Africa, they depend on girls' children to bring money home. But now, in Australia, oh, the man's bad. But they say, don't look where you fell, but where you slipped. So we shouldn't just look at the problem. Let's look at what causing the problem, then we'll understand. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Rebecca?
Oh, my son.
Okay. If you have any, we only take 2 questions, so if you have a question, please, this is your time to ask. Anybody, any questions? No questions? Okay, so Rebecca is going to, you got a question?
Not a question, something to say. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. Okay.
As she's closing, I just want to say thank you to Rebecca for organizing all this and for her sleepless nights and for working so hard to make this happen. And this is from... Okay, you finish the conference.
Thank you. So Rebecca is going to do the closing remarks. I hope you had a good day and I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot. And I believe you've taken a lot today. So obviously you can take that back to the community and start making changes and changing lives. And I always say, personal development is a gift that you give to others. So when you change yourself, then, only then, can other people copy and emulate that and maybe also become better people. And it's not easy to change people. So, Rebecca.
So, we are the survivors for today. The 5 hours today convention. Before I quickly close, can we give a good round of applause to the MC? Good job. And we had, we have had that nice lunch. As I said, who were to be our providers, and the other provider has already left, but our sister Anne with Delphine put in a lot of effort to purchase the food. Give me also this opportunity to thank all our presenters. Each one of them has been wonderful. So let's put our hands together. There are the people who need to be thanked even more beyond, and they are not here, but I believe there's a video which is being recorded. My brother Clyde, make sure that this is included. This is called Strengthening Australian Families and Communities Relationships. You saw mothers bringing their children. They were assured that they would be child-minded. And there were 2 educators who committed themselves and looked after those little ones you saw to allow their mothers, their fathers to attend this convention. So let's go down. And then I will not forget, of course, My Care African Women Network, of course headed by Mama Teresa there. They secured funding to train the ambassadors, and then organize an event like this one or something else. And we need to thank Mama Teresa for securing that funding, which was allocated to different communities which participated, and then today
How much was it?
been.
How much was it, Rebecca?
Yes. Now, for this convention to be possible, don't think like it was huge money. Now, one strategy that we did was, out of the me, Teresa, team, Dr. Apollo, then Dr. Charles and Kenneth. So that's about 6 people. And then, of course, we have Lucy Sierra Leone. What we did was, instead of Malawi, me alone with Charles, the same meager allocation of money, we planned something that would have just been very small, but again, not really empowering as what has happened today. So that's why we thought of, let's put our financial resources together, human resources together, draw on our strengths, everything, and then invite everybody else and be part of this. So that's why today, the day has been like this. And what came on my mind was, as we progressed planning for this event, just 4 meetings only, within 4 weeks, that's what has given birth to today, was, if we really do well, of course there will be weaknesses there, we learn, there are lessons to learn. However, this is like something like a pioneer. This is an initial attempt to partnering African communities. We partner together and we can work together. And we've done it. Not so? Yeah. And yes, we've done it. We've done it. Yes, we can. And here we are. So we'll learn from this model and then improve on it. Also, yes. And one other thing is Eva. Wherever she is, she's done a wonderful job. The pre-training survey and then the post-training survey, just to evaluate the program. The information, whatever the findings are, these will be shared to anyone interested, to relevant bodies. And thank you to every participant in this room. Whether you came in the morning, or you came midday, or just 1 hour before finishing, you have put your shoulders to the wheel, and that's why today it has been a success. So we need to pat ourselves on the back. And allow me to finish this way. Our brother, Clyde, he was contacted only, he was approached only yesterday or 2 days ago.
Thursday night, yeah.
Yeah, and there he is. Said, no, my sister, oh come, I'll be there. In the morning he was engaged, but there he has come up, and there he's doing his job. So if you want any media, okay, work, social media and so on, there is our brother Clyde you can go to and you'll be able to work with him. So thank you, a huge thank you to everybody who will engage you again in future, in our future events. Thank you.